Hi, everyone. It's Jessica here at Aesthetic Equine. Um, I am just jumping on here to update some videos on YouTube. It's been a little bit. I've been sharing some other places, but today I already was outside, did my chores, did a little bit of writing, but it's a rainy day. So I always feel like sometimes I get off track from doing these videos and sharing so that you can save these resources and um, just sharing our knowledge and experiences. So today I was going to jump on since right now, this year in Wisconsin, we are in the middle of breeding season. And it had me thinking on mare care and stallion care. And I know I've shared before, but I haven't uploaded a video here on our actual channel yet. So the topic today is just going to be some general feedback on things to think about if you're considering breeding your mare. Usually when people call, we have a list of questions, a list of goals, expectations that everyone has, and then also just some things to make sure that you're evaluating on your mare to make sure that you are going to get the best outcome possible, and just some questions even to raise that you might bring up to a stallion owner, especially if you're looking at different contracts and things like that. So again, I'm Jessica, Aesthetic Equine. We are a small farm in Midwestern Wisconsin. We do focus on Morgan and Andalusian breeds specifically. A lot of our babies end up being sport type. So we have a lot that are in dressage, eventing when they do grow up. And then we also have a lot that just because of their trainability and fun dispositions of the breeds we have are great family horses. So we have horses doing a little bit of everything here. So I do have a notes, so you'll see me kind of looking off to the side here as as I talk about the topics. But some of the things, if you're considering breeding your mare, and this is probably more helpful to you if you've not bred a ton of mares, maybe you're looking at doing this, debating breeding your mare versus buying a foal, is just really thinking about what is your goal in breeding the mare and what is your goal in the aspects of that foal that you get. So I always tell people, especially if it's a personal mare, it's your riding mare, with horses, a lot of times breeding, we have no issues. We have no issues with foaling, but there is this counterbalance of breeding a mare and having a foal does come with certain risks. So just be aware that sometimes, even though having this mare have a baby, you just want to do all that you can to make sure that everything goes smooth. And even sometimes the best laid plans, there can be, with all animals, unknowns, unexpected, and be prepared that you might be adding a risk um, to that mare that you don't currently have. So sometimes for people, when they weigh that out and they actually think about it, and they think about, is the foal more for the reason of maybe it's a certain pedigree or something about that mare, or there's a specific cross that maybe there has siblings and you want to, have one to retain, or their ability of the siblings. That's great. And definitely, we do raise foals and we really enjoy it and it's lots of fun. But for some people, as they think about it, it's more just getting the foal. And in the end, if they balance out some of the expenses, some of the time, some of the limitations, some of the risks, they will opt to purchase a foal instead of breed their mare. And I would say neither choice is right or wrong. But it is something that we always do talk about because every, I don't know, we have not personally lost a mare, but I do know people who have lost mares just due to complications with carrying a foal, due to complications with foaling. We've also had some that maybe have mild or minor injuries or limitations of being used when they're bred. So those are all things that I would definitely encourage you to just think about if you're watching this as maybe a first-time mare owner looking to breed, or maybe you've had a few babies, but just really evaluate why. Why are you looking to breed? And just know that you feel comfortable with the choice that you're making, because either way, it's, it can be lots of fun to help that mare through foaling, to raise a foal from, day one on. But also, if you get a weanling foal or you look for somebody local that has foals, you still can have a really great experience and maybe continue to use your mare without limitations, um, without decreasing your riding or showing. So there's definitely different aspects. And if you also are working with a clinic close to you, you might even find options where you do something such as a recip mare. So maybe you end up flushing an embryo from the mare because you have very high expectations of what you're doing, and you still get a full out of that mare, but you're going to be doing a more intense process, which I won't be talking about here, but it definitely is something, depending where you're located and what your vets offer, that is a very common choice for some people. It is typically going to be more expensive. So that's the other thing. It's definitely becomes a budget conversation with your vet to know what that might run. And we have not done one in quite a while, so I wouldn't even be able to give you a rough estimate. But I do know you end up adding another horse's care. The processes are more intense of handling, the mare, handling the embryo, all of that. So it definitely can be a little bit more expensive. But the things that I'm just going to touch base on. So as you kick off, and let's say you're debating breeding your mare, where there's a stallion that's really, brought your interest up and you're thinking, well, that would be a great cross for my mare. And we are not going to get breed specific here on these topics, but I would encourage you to do these, run throughs for yourself. If you're doing that and you've gotten that far where it's a thought, I would encourage you to look at your mare's health. So look at her age, know what the prime is. A lot of times we're looking more at like 6 to 12 if we haven't bred any of our mares. But definitely there's reasons sometimes why people may go younger than that. And there's reasons why people may go older than that. If you get into like those teen years, or especially if you're going to push up into 20, the age can matter. But the thing I always tell people, if your mare has a history of having a foal, even if it wasn't with you, their chances of successfully getting bred as they're older is higher, just from what research has said. Yet I know plenty of people who maybe have taken a 17, 19-year-old maiden mare and had no issues breeding it too. So it's not a guarantee, but it's just more the statistics of it. So know kind of your mare's age, know if you're setting yourself up where it might be, harder to get in full, or there might be reasons that could be health concerns to be aware of. So make sure that you know your mare's age, and then to know if they've had any foals before and how that went. Evaluate your mare's body condition. So sometimes, depending upon what the use is of your horse, when we get ready to go into breeding season, oftentimes we're going to err on the side of being heavier versus underweight. So even though we've come out of winter, and depending where you are, sometimes horses, maybe don't weather the best through the winter, or maybe you're using them heavily and they need to be in a certain body condition for the sport that they're in. Oftentimes when we get into breeding, the preference of going into the breeding season is going to be erring on, moderate, maybe even on the heavy side of things. You don't want obesity, of course, in the mare, but we definitely want to have some leeway there on their body condition. Make sure that their health and their like overall fitness, I don't want to say lameness, but I mean that there isn't an underlying factor that's going to be compounded by being pregnant, because that's not always a lameness thing. Sometimes it can be metabolic related. So just really know your mare and know their health limits, maybe know any restrictions or questionable things about your mare, and definitely get a vet involved if you're not sure. And we always suggest even just a regular checkup anyways. If you're going to breed and your mare is totally healthy, it's a good idea just to have your vet on board to understand that you're debating breeding, and then for them maybe just to have be second professional type eyes of, raising questions that there might be issues with your mare. Make sure that they have a balanced diet, because even though some horses might be easy keepers, is in order to have the highest rate of pregnancy, you definitely want to have a balanced ratio when it comes to like their minerals and their salt and everything, because that can just make your mare healthier and also end up with a higher success rate. Make sure that if you're going into breeding, we typically suggest being up to date on vaccines, up to date on worming or a worming evaluation, just to know where your mare sits with parasite load. Do also make sure that they're up to date with their feet, because you don't want to be causing discomfort or stress. So make sure that they don't have any oddities with their feet that you would need to be aware of as you start the process. It's better off to be aware of everything and have your mare in the best health possible, because as you start the process, you're going to continue to ask more of that mare. So if they get bred successfully, that mare is going to be using more energy, and they're going to eventually also carry more weight as they go into later pregnancy. So just be sure that you're really looking at that your mare is healthy and that they're up to date. When it comes time to get ready to breed, it's going to depend. For us, the two most common things that we're working with is a live cover breeding. So that's going to be typically done within a controlled setting. And so your mare and your stallion are actually going to have interaction. And again, it's not a pasture setting. Some places do offer pasture breeding, but usually it's more, the pasture breeding is if somebody has an established herd. I don't ever offer any type of pasture breeding, because there's definitely a pecking order that would occur. Plus, for the safety of our stallions, we do not run them with the mares, just because we have several stallions and we have a very small mare group. So typically, if our stallions do run together, it's in the winter, they're either with each other. Once in a while, we've had a stallion that maybe will run with like 2 bred mares, and usually it's the stallion that we had bred with, but we don't do pasture breeding, even if they're going to live together. So you have your live cover options, and again, that's typically a controlled setting. Be aware and ask if you're doing a live cover. Make sure you know their processes, that you feel comfortable with it, that they aren't, that if you don't want the mare turned out with the stallion, that you at least know that's not going to happen, and know that if the stallion's too aggressive or maybe your mare doesn't stand well, how is the breeder going to handle that? That's not a common occurrence, but it definitely can be. I know for us at our farm, if we do live cover, which a lot of times we aren't doing as much anymore, is we always tell mare owners, if we have an issue with the mare standing or something, with a overly, whatever reason, the stallion being too aggressive towards that mare, is we will avoid that breeding. We'll see if, another day into the cycle, that mare will stand. But just be aware when it comes time for breeding, that you know how that's going to be handled. If you're doing working like with a vet, and we're going to be doing artificial insemination, so a lot of times you'll hear me say AI, is typically you're not going to have direct contact with the stallion and the mare together, but you still want to know what that process looks like if you're working with a vet clinic. There are some breeding management facilities that do that on site. And so just ask lots of questions. What are the fees related with that? How do they time it? If you're with a vet, they're going to be actually measuring the progression and looking just to breed, 1 or 2 times maybe with a shipment of semen. But I know there's a few places, and I doubt anyone still does it, but when I was younger, where they would just track the mare, not necessarily with an ultrasound or measuring, but they were looking for signs of heat. And then they would still use ship semen or collected semen, depending on the setting, every other day while that mare was in heat. So just be aware of the different processes. And if it's new to you, do some research online, read from some universities that focus on equine breeding, and even some vet clinics that focus on it. They'll have just articles for you to get a little bit familiar with the terminology and what to know. So those are a few of the background, thought processes I go through, the things that I share with mare owners as like starting point, kicking off. If you've gotten that far and you kind of know the process, you're still wanting to do this, and you're feeling that it is right for you, that's great. Some of the things that I would just be aware of, or that we'll suggest for mare owners, is make sure that you know the contract that you're working with for the stallion. So some stallion contracts will offer a live foal guarantee. Some do not offer that. It doesn't always mean that there's a reason they don't offer it. It just might be the way that their fees are set up. It could be, a billion other terms. So if you get a live foal guarantee, just be aware of what that means and what your responsibilities are. That if something goes wrong, how that, maybe you get a partial deposit back, or maybe you get to rebreed. Just know what those terms are. Know what the stallion's schedule is. So very few places can you just call up one day, get a contract, and immediately be able to breed your mare. Because sometimes we get, you've walked through the process and you maybe worked with your vet, or you're ready to do this. Typically, most stallions still have a booking schedule, so they can't just take mares whenever, or their vet clinic can't just always add another mare. Sometimes the shipments are filled up for that day. Sometimes, in our case, like we have to transport our stallion to the vet, so we need 24-hour notice. So know what your stallion's schedule is. And your vet and the stallion owner will be able to tell you that. They'll be able to tell you if it's a live cover, how many mares might be coming that month, what month they have an opening for you. If you're dealing with a vet clinic or a breeding facility and we're going to be doing a collection and a shipping, they would be able to tell you what the days are and typically what the notice is. So most places are going to require you to give them 24-hour notice. And yet vet clinics, breeding facilities understand that animals are animals, and mares and stallions sometimes opt to do their own thing, or sometimes even FedEx gets involved, or UPS, whoever's doing the shipping, and there can be issues. So just know what is the typical schedule. So a lot of places do Monday, Wednesday, and Friday is when they collect and ship. So that would mean you're going to have to give them a heads up, either the clinic or the stallion owner, on Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, whatever it might be. And sometimes it's even nice to know, hey, we're checking this mare, we're looking like 3 days out, I just want to check in on the schedule and let you know we'll probably be calling. So just know how they communicate. Communication. So again, if you're working with a good stallion owner or a good breeding facility, even if it's your first time, and you let them know that, make sure that you're asking questions that you're not sure of, and even ask for tips from them. Like, what do they suggest doing? What do they, other backups, security, whatever it might be, because sometimes you can get yourself into this. This does cost a lot of money to do it. It's not free. It's not just the breeding fee, especially if you're dealing with like multiple vets, multiple facilities, shipping, those costs. It's important to have good communication, good timing, and then still, that everything goes as it's supposed to be. There's that unknown factor where, the vet clinic doesn't control it. I've had crazy stories of, people telling me that the delivery people were running behind, and, they were out, I want to say it was like desert type, so Arizona, where it's really warm, and there's a gate to the facility and no one could get there. So a message was sent, nobody got it. This thing sat out in the sun all day, so you have things there where would that impact the temperature of your shipment? It definitely could if it's going to sit out in some extreme weather. So just be aware of what the unknowns are. Also know in the stallion contract, like what the terms of payment are. Make sure that you've done your part as the mare owner to have everything ready to go. Also, if there's any follow-up. So does the stallion owner require you to do like a 15-day check, roughly 15, 20 days, whatever their terms might be on their contract, to avoid the potential, conflict of catching the mare didn't take right away, or maybe the chance of twins. That's typically that early check. That's what we're looking for. And then some stallion owner checks will even have you do like repeat checks. So they want to know that the if your mare is in full at that early check, they want to know that it's still in full and progressing normally at some point. For some stallion owners, if there's a live full guarantee and something happens during foaling. So now we're talking, the following year, your mare's bred, you've gotten that far. Let's say something happens during foaling, or for some reason, even during that winter. Well, here it's winter. The mare loses the foal. What is that process? Do they require a vet to write a note confirming that the foal was actually lost? Do they just require a 24-hour notice? What might happen in the case that something detrimental does happen? What communications do you need to be aware of? What timing do you need to be aware of? I would say also, just looking here, when we're going to book, we do require a contract, we require the payment. And then the other thing, again, the mare care, we suggest that. And typically, we also suggest that you look at doing a culture. So to make sure like that the uterine culture, that everything, there isn't an infection in that mare, just that it could be caught and treated and avoid wasted breedings or avoid wasted fees without doing a culture. So always the culture is a great thing, as well as looking at having the vet look at the anatomy of the mare, because if you have maybe a mare that just physically is fine, but her anatomy of like her vulva or her tail, is sometimes there may be a process called a caslix. So you would want to be aware that would be a mare that maybe pools something and would cause a repeated infection. So you want to have your mare at least looked at to know, like, would she need a caslix? And a lot of times mares don't need that, but it is another thing that I bring up, is make sure that you're aware of the mare's anatomy, or that someone has looked at it. And especially if the vet's doing a culture, they're going to be looking back there anyways. They should also, when you head into breeding, is ultrasounding your mare to know where she's at in her cycle. So some stallion owners, even if you're going to do live cover, this can help you time it out and make sure too that your mare is past that transitional season, because sometimes naturally in winter their body's going to shut down. They might still do some cycling, but as the season change and the light impacts change, you might get a mare that does a really weird transition where she's not going to be bred for a month or two unless you do something to kind of kick her in. But there would be no reason for you to go pay board or a bunch of vet fees if that's the case. You'd want to help that mare along, get her cycling, or give her another month to get her out of her winter transitional cycle. But that's kind of a lot. I probably jumped around a little bit, but hopefully those topics are just some stuff that you can mull over if you're considering breeding your mare. Again, my advice is not as a veterinarian. It's not as a total expert. It's just the conversations and the topics that we often have with mare owners. It's some of the things that we ask ourselves if we look to breed mares. If we're breeding on the farm, we don't do quite as intensive stuff because we've tracked these mares. We have a regular vet relationship to know where we're at with some of these things. But definitely feel free to, reach out to us if you're interested in breeding to one of our stallions. But even if you just want, this video raised another question, feel free to reach out. We are always happy to share our experiences. And again, we are a breeding farm. We are not a certified breeding facility, and we definitely are not a veterinarian. So seek those other places too, and hope everyone has a great day.